Hi to everyone who has joined us. If you would just pop your name and where you're from into the chat, as well as what your role is at your school. We've got some Spanish language arts teachers, math and science teachers, Latinx culture after school program teachers, ESL teachers, art teachers. We've got a wide range student teachers starting soon. Good luck with that. Always a fun time. Music teacher, excellent. High school theater, that has to be fun. Okay. So we're going to get started. Everyone, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Corinne Zaragoza Estrella. I am the outreach coordinator of the UNC-Duke Consortium in Latin American and Caribbean Studies. And this is our virtual professional development week, working with Latin American immigrants. Today's session is arts-based practices for bilingual students. And we are joined today with Dr. Kristin Papoi, who is the clinical assistant professor and the MAT program director at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. We're going to do a few kind of housekeeping type things before we get started with Dr. Papoi's presentation. A couple of Zoom etiquette rules and reminders for you all. Please mute yourself during the presentation so everyone can hear properly. If you are new to Zoom, if you're looking down at the bottom, there's the mute button in your left-hand corner. We also ask that you turn off your video during the presentation to increase audio-visual quality for all. You can find that video button next to the mute button down there. And feel free during the Dr. Papoi's presentation, if you have a question that pops up, just put it in the chat and then she'll answer that at the end of the session or when she has time for questions. And that chat box is right in the middle there. Obviously, y'all are very involved in that, which is really great. So you seem to know where it is. Okay. Some session workshop notes. That all the sessions will be recorded and uploaded to the UNC-Duke Consortium YouTube channel at a later date. So if there's something you want to go back and review again, if you want to share this presentation with your colleagues and coworkers at your school, we will get those edited and put up hopefully by the end of the month so you can share those out with your networks. And we'll also be able to provide the PowerPoint presentation at the end. So if there's some information that you think is really useful or some links in there that you want to access more, we will be sharing at the end of the week a folder with all the presentations as well. Okay. And that is it for me. I'm going to hand it over to Kristin. So thank you so much for joining us, and we are very excited to have you.
All right, well, thank you. This is really wonderful to have everyone together. This is a lot of fun to be doing this, having this conversation over Zoom. I usually have this as quite an interactive presentation. So if you all will humor me at some points, and we'll try to translate this into Zoom, which is what we're all trying to do right now. And I think I found some engaging ways to get some of that accomplished. So I'm really looking forward to it. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here, and hopefully it should all work. Can you see my title slide there? So, okay, I know a couple of you that are here joining us. Lily is one. I know she's heard me say this so many times, this idea that whoever talks the most learns the most. So what I want to share with you today is ways that we can use the arts for students' sense making through art making, okay, as a way to spur conversation, to spur language development, vocabulary development, all kinds of things. So I'll tell you a little bit about this, and then we'll engage in some activities as well. As Corinne mentioned, I am the program director of the Masters of Arts of Teaching program here at UNC Chapel Hill. I'm also a faculty member here. My research is based on arts integration, particularly for emergent bilingual students. And but I also do research in teacher education and literacy practices, multiliteracy practices as well. So always happy to talk with you about any of those kinds of topics. So I'm going to get started in introducing myself a little bit by telling you, introducing you to me when I was 8 years old. Here is the picture of me. You know what? Excuse me. I'm sorry. Can I pause it? You're going to have to edit this out, Corinne. I have the wrong view showing. I would like to
Oh,
make
that's
sure
fine.
that yeah, I'm so sorry.
That was a great photo. I really want to see that photo again. So
Okay,
share that again.
you will get to. Sorry about that. Hopefully you will just be able to see the, hold on a second here. Presenter view is what I want. And now I need to go to Zoom. Okay, sorry folks. Hopefully you're just seeing the slide, or are you seeing the presenter view?
Now we're seeing presenter view. Before we were seeing just the slide.
Okay, well then, you know what? We'll just go back to the slide. I won't have any notes then. I'm just going to be winging it. Okay, y'all be forgiving with me. Thank you. Okay, I can do this, right? Present. These are all the things that I just tell my students when I'm teaching. I'm modeling my learning. Okay, thank you. AD Wiggins, I'm glad. I've endeared myself showing you that I am not the perfect technology-wise either. All right, here I am. This is me when I was 8 years old. Can everyone see it, Corinne? Is it good? So this, bonus points for anyone who knows where this might be, where this photo was taken. It was actually in at the top of Machu Picchu, Peru. When I was 8 years old, my family moved to Venezuela, and I had grown up in Ohio. And we suddenly moved to Venezuela, where I was going to a school where I was required to speak Spanish, just 2 classes a day, but I had never spoken Spanish before in my life. And here I was thrust into this new environment, and confused by things that were happening in the classes where Spanish was being spoken, because I couldn't understand everything. I relied a lot on my peers. I relied on teachers' gestures. And it was something that really was hard for me, because I remember wanting to please my teachers, wanting to do the right thing, wanting to understand what was happening. But I just couldn't in the fullest way that I had been used to doing when I was in classes, you know, in my 2nd and 3rd grade class back home in Ohio, where my home language was being spoken. So what I ended up finding as I went along and got a little bit more adept with learning the language is, of course, I made friends, and they were also very helpful to me. But I really found myself engaging in learning through making things. I still remember making a salt dough map of Venezuela. Like, I can still tell you where the Orinoco River Delta is, and, you know, the peninsulas and Lago Maracaibo and all of that. Singing the Venezuelan national anthem and learning those words and making connections between those words that sounded like words I knew in English, and trying to unpack the meaning of that song we sang every morning at school. Also drawing a lot in my VSS class, which was Venezuelan Social Studies, learning about the flora and fauna of Venezuela. And what I realized is, looking at all these things, these were all modalities that I was able to tap into as a language learner to support me. Okay, I learned this very young, and I wasn't able to really articulate it then. But as I became older, I became a teacher, and I taught 8-year-olds. Suddenly, I was a 3rd grade teacher. I taught in Southeast Los Angeles. Here's a picture of me with some of my students one year. And when I was teaching with them, I worked with an organization called Trash for Teaching, and I'll tell you a little bit more about them later, where we were using a lot of materials to make things that was, you know, in order to illustrate our stories. We were kind of creating these 3D drawings of of what we were writing about in our ELA units. And what I noticed is that here's little Itzel, who is now a beautiful, she's in her 20s now. This was her story. She wrote about sleeping in her bed, and this was her little bed that she created. So when I taught 8-year-olds, I noticed how they were able to just really engage in ideas in such a deep way, to show me things, to ask me things, to work with one another on telling stories or playing games, through the arts, through dance, through theater. And it was such an opportunity for language production that I became really interested in understanding how that all worked. So that's what I'm here to talk with you a little bit about today. My question as I started to become after I became a teacher, after my time in the classroom, when I went to graduate school and started thinking about some research questions, I kept coming back to this question that I experienced both as a learner and as a teacher myself, about how do arts-based practices, or sorry, why do arts-based practices matter for our emergent bilingual students? And more importantly, because I'm really interested in practical research that teachers can use, how does this happen pedagogically? There's actually not a lot of research about this, empirical research, I should say. And so, and there's more since I have conducted this. This comes out of my dissertation research, which I finished back in 2016. So my data was collected in 2015. But I really wanted to make this research practical for you, for teachers, and something that could be used. I think a lot of it just provides information that you all as teachers in your various roles already know is working, but it gives a little bit more teeth, so to speak, pun intended with the gears here, to talk about this kind of work and to value this work and to make time and space for this work in our classrooms across the curriculum. So let's get our gears moving a little bit. This is the interactive portion of of our session today. I'm hoping it'll work. Corinne, how many participants have we got here today? I can't quite see.
We have about, not including you and me, 28.
Perfect. Okay. I think we can do this. Let's do this first one. Actually, I'm going to do this first one. I'm going to need some volunteers. So, oops, I need 4 volunteers. You don't have to be a magnificent artist by any stretch of the imagination, but I would love to have 4 people. So I don't know if you want to pop your name into the chat and then go ahead and unmute yourself, Corinne, if you can call out names as you volunteer. I promise I'll be very nice. Oh, hello, someone here is from Venezuela. That's wonderful. I'd love to chat with you. Okay, so don't be shy here. I'll give you 10,000 extra bonus points if you volunteer. Okay, thank you, Lily. I know I can always count on you. Lily, you're going to be number 1. This is painless and quite fun. All right, Lily, welcome. Thank you. Thank you.
Jody H is volunteering as well. And
okay.
Anne, I'm assuming that's your first name. Anne Harrowwood. That's a great last name.
So Jody, you're going to be number 2. And Anne, you'll be number 3. And one more person. I promise it'll be painless. Okay, thank you, Angelita. Okay, Angelita, you'll be 4. Okay. All right, so with this, number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, I am going to ask you, we're going to do a little drawing exercise, which you kind of saw when I gave it away. All right, so on your, now here's the tricky part. you should have a tool that says annotate on your toolbar. Does everyone see that? So now in your boxes, and now I've lost track of all the different names, in box number 1, if you're assigned to box number 1, can you please draw a closed figure? Any kind of closed figure will work. Box 2, please draw a acute angle. All right, so box 1 is any kind of closed figure. Box 2 is an acute angle. Box 3, let's do a squiggly line. And box 4, let's do another closed shape, any kind of shape. Okay, and you'll get to mess around with all of these different tools as you go. You can figure out the different thicknesses and colors and all that kind of stuff. Okay. All right, so in box 3, we're just going to get a squiggly line in there. The pressure's on. Okay, there you go, Anne.
I can't do it.
That's okay.
I don't know. I really think someone else, I'm going to waste time. I'm really having fun, but I'm going to waste time.
Okay, that's okay. Oh, someone got one in there. All right. Not sure who did that.
That was me. It's not.
Okay,
Yeah.
Corinne. So Corinne, you're in it to win it now. So
Yeah,
you're going to have to be a part of this. Okay.
Other stuff. But.
So now this is kind of like drawing volleyball. We're going to rotate. So number 1 goes to 2, number 2 goes to 3, number 3 goes to 4, and number 4 goes back to number 1. I want you to move to your next box, and I'm going to give you a set amount of time. It's going to be a short amount of time. Uh-oh, our thing went away. Don't erase it. Don't erase it. Put that acute angle back there. Okay, we're going to be adding on to everyone's drawings. All right, so let's go ahead and rotate to your next box. And in that box with whatever you have, I'm going to give you a little bit of time, and I want you to turn your shape or your line into a monster. Okay, so draw a monster, any kind of monster. Go. Set my timer here. All right. Give you about, let's see, we'll count down.
Wait, that doesn't make sense.
Doesn't matter, anything you got. 10 more seconds. All right. Okay, and stop. All right. Very nice. Now we're going to rotate again. Take a look at what is happening in all the other boxes and rotate again. Same way we did before. Move on to to the next number, or if you're number 4, go to number 1. And I want you to go to your box and go to that next box and add something to that monster. Okay, go. Go add something to the next monster. I see some eyelashes coming up here. Oh, little mohawk, a tail. Someone's playing golf, it looks like. Is that what that is? Or holding a flag? All right, so we're adding something to every monster. Oh, someone's getting a hat. Number 1 looks like, oh, is he in the snow? He's got that pom-pom on top of his hat. Reminds me of those hats we wore back in Wisconsin. Oh, it's nighttime, maybe an alien. Love it. Okay, about 10 more seconds. Just keep drawing. Don't stop. Just keep going with whatever you've got going on. Okay. Lovely. All right. Okay, now stop. Take a look at what we've got here. We're going to rotate again. Boy, I wish we had more space. This is where the learning happens about our online work. Okay, so now let's go to your next spot. Rotate to the next location. Take a look at your monster and draw a little speech bubble, or you don't even have to do that, or a thought bubble, but let's make your monster say something. What's your monster going to say? There's a text feature on Annotate, so if you want, you can draw those words or you can use text if you like, either way. Let's have your monster say something. And Corinne, I'm going to rely on you if you wouldn't mind taking a picture of this when it's all done, because I'm afraid I'm going to mess it up because it looks really awesome. Oh, stars. I'd rather be. My mascara is running. And I'd rather be, I think it says eating. Lovely. All right. Oh, yes. Wonderful. I hope you like cherries. Oh my goodness. I am wondering about number 4. Yes, I hope you like cherries. Oh, it's a cherry. I thought it was a golf ball. Oh, golf course. Wonderful. Okay. Let's finish that up. Now go back to your original monster. I think we're back to our original monster now. Go to your number 1, 2, 3, or 4 monster and get to know your monster. Say, hello, monster. And let's go ahead and think of a name for your monster. And I'm going to ask you to introduce your monster just in a sentence or two with their name and tell us something about them. Okay? So, and I would normally do this probably in a partner share kind of situation. I am just raising that affective filter for you here, making it a little bit stressful for those of you who are volunteering. So I thank you for bringing your courage here to us today. But if you feel comfortable, I would love to invite you to introduce your monster to the whole group. So who do we have here? We've got 4 very fun, perhaps scary looking monsters. Let's go ahead and get some introductions with names. I'll let anyone who wants to pop in number 1, 2, 3, or 4 go for it.
I'll go.
Maybe. Okay.
It's Nicole. I started with number 2.
Hi.
And number 2's mascara is running. So let's see. I think that monster's name is Betty. She likes to get all dolled up even though she's in her monster quarantine.
I love it, Betty. All right, wonderful. Hi, Betty. I had a little mascara issue this morning myself. I had to get fancy for y'all. All right, I feel you, Betty. All right, who else do we have?
I can go with number 1.
All right, Lily, let's meet number 1.
I think this monster's name would be trying to go along with the star theme, maybe Estrella. She comes out at night with her scary hat to scare people who are having too many lights on so you can't see the stars because her favorite thing is stargazing.
I love it. Yeah, she looks mad with those eyes and those teeth. I love it. Hola, Estrella. All right. What about the other 2 monsters?
So I did number 4. I've been thinking of a name. I'm thinking maybe Martha. Maybe she's a monster who's doing a lot of quarantine baking. She really hopes you like cherries because she's got a bunch of cherries in season and she's going to make a cherry pie here pretty soon.
Lovely. Hello, Martha. Martha, is that what you said?
Martha, sure.
All right. I was listening to the story so much I lost the name. We know that happens sometimes. All right, and our last monster.
I was number 1 with what looks like a toboggan somebody put on it.
Uh-huh.
So I guess I'm the abominable snow monster, and I'm in Alaska. Where you could
Wonderful.
see all the stars and, you know, out in the middle of nowhere.
All right. So I think that is Australia. So you also have like have another story going on with Australia up there as well. I love it. Wonderful. Okay, thank you, volunteers. This is great. I really appreciate it. This is something I typically do in person, but I think it worked out okay here. Sorry, I'm a little bit distracted because a little neighbor child is knocking at my door trying to get my child to come out and walk the dog, but we're gonna just let her walk away. So wonderful. Well, here we are. Look at what we created. This is amazing. We all just took some time to draw a lot of things, and we did it collaboratively. And we did it with using some language together. Ooh, our monsters are still kind of there. I wonder if we can clear the page. So let me ask you, what just happened? What did you all notice? What just happened? I'm going to invite people to share out. Oh, thank you. We're working together. Yeah. Collaborated to create a story, a narrative. Absolutely. Oh, good. I'm glad every participant was engaged. Yes. Little bit on the screen. All right. So thank you for humoring me. We're going to keep going back to these questions. So again, now that we unique expressions, yes, a very good way to encourage people to talk, equally engaged in creating the story, no wrong answers, all these good things. These are things we know work for all students really, and all language learners. Oh, Corinne, thank you. You're so focused on the art that you weren't embarrassed. Wonderful. I love that. Wonderful. Okay, so this is what I was interested in exploring. Okay, so now I'm going to dive in a little bit and tell you about my research. Again, why do these practices matter? You've all just named quite a few, right? But what does the research say about that? And how can I add to that? And how does this happen in schools? How are ways that we can do it? I think Corinne's point of you're so focused on the art that you weren't embarrassed, right? It took me a while to get some volunteers, and that was because, well, like I think people, especially adults, are thinking, well, I'm not an artist. I don't know. I'm not an art teacher. I know we have some art teachers with us, but those of us who aren't, I wasn't an art teacher, right? We don't think that we can teach the art, but we can teach in and through the arts. And the word through is the important one here, right? With simple things like this. I mean, if we took a picture, and Corinne will share that with us at some point, that was art. That was so cool. And we had stories tied to it. So let me tell you a little bit about how I investigated this, okay? So a little bit about my study design. I did a multiple site case study that engaged 2 different sites where I looked at observation of arts-based practices, and I talked to the teachers and the students by conducting interviews and focus groups. And then I collected a lot of artifacts that they created through photos and through scanning of stories. There were 2 different kinds of sites that they were working with. But I used these pieces of data that I collected and analyzed them through a language and literacy research lens that helped me to kind of unpack what these pieces of data were telling me, right? And what they were telling me about language. The two organizations that were the cases that I looked at, I mentioned this one before, Trash for Teaching. They're now called 2-Bit Circus. I have some links later in the presentation where you can look them up. But Trash for Teaching is an organization that basically, this is in Los Angeles, they took materials from manufacturers, clean, safe, but things that would otherwise go in a landfill, and repurposed them and got them into classrooms, is basically the short version of the story. Barrel of Monkeys, and I'm not going to focus on that, but that is a playwriting, it's a theater group where they had students write stories, and then they turned the stories into plays that teaching artists then performed back at the schools. I'm going to focus my talk today on the Trash for Teaching bit. Just in the interest of time, I'll just go over the theoretical frameworks that I use to look at this. I use this idea of multiliteracies. And if you're interested in learning more about those, I invite you to look into these sources. You're welcome to contact me and I can send you some things to read about that. But it's the idea that we expand our notion of what literacy is beyond just reading, writing, listening, and speaking, right? That there are all forms of communication, right? From gesture, drawing, movement, song, of course, technology is a big piece of that as well, right? And so that was a really useful theory as we're thinking about working with both emergent bilingual students as well as working in the arts. So it kind of married my two pieces of my research together to help me think a little bit more deeply about it. Again, that persistent question. So there is some research about arts and emergent bilingual students, right? In the literature, the conversation really is about this, either you are, it's the instrumental, like we learn the arts so that we can learn how to sing or play an instrument or do ballet, right? Or to learn something, right? Or there's the arts for art's sake. We do it because it helps us feel good to create, that we're creating something new and giving that to the world. So there's kind of that conversation that's out there and happening in the literature. There's also a cultural engagement argument for using the arts with emergent bilingual students, right? That it's a way for us to engage with students and their cultural backgrounds, and to engage the arts that are culturally relevant and culturally sustaining. So that's also a piece of it. And you may see threads of this happening in different ways in your schools, in your settings. And then of course there's that the arts are a way for language learners as a scaffold, right? It's an ELL learning strategy, right? Provide a picture, make a drawing. If you're not writing yet in English, but you can draw something, and then that serves as a scaffold. I'm sure that many of you are familiar with that. So this is what's out there in the literature. But that body of work in the arts and emergent bilinguals students is really small. And so I wanted to expand on that. I'm gonna go past this theory piece because I really want to get into the good stuff. So here is a little bit about Trash for Teaching, and I described it a little bit. These are some pictures from their warehouse. They've got these marvelous blue bins all full of different kinds of materials, all sorted beautifully, little plastic bits from the end of pens that were manufactured, things like that. They also have a workspace in there. And here's just some ideas of all the interesting materials that are available. And so one school that is using their materials is a school that in my study I called Esperanza School. It's also in Los Angeles, and they have a partnership with Trash for Teaching. They have both a bilingual track and a structured English immersion kind of part of their school, but they engage in project-based inquiry, what they call the arts integration cycle, where students are creating art and making meaning of content areas as well as language. That art is displayed everywhere throughout the school. Here's that beautiful gear picture again. They make some really enormous murals, and you'll see some pictures of some other things in the works as they're engaging in that arts integration cycle. I am curious, and you can just pop this into the chat, if anyone is familiar with the Reggio Emilia approach. It's an early childhood approach to education, where it's out of a town in Italy called Reggio Emilia, where they really look at the child as a communicator and is capable from infancy, right? And they engage the arts from the very earliest ages to have children explore what they call the 100 languages, to explore what they know about the world and what they're learning. And so the Esperanza School is based in this Reggio philosophy, but applying it through taking it out of that early childhood context and applying it to elementary school. And so they provide, they have not only an arts pedagogist that works with every classroom teacher in the school, but also artists in residence, okay? And this is something that is unique to their school, and I know doesn't exist at every school. But what I want to point your attention to is they have what in the Reggio approach are called ateliers. Basically, they're kind of art centers. They're areas where interesting materials, yes, Laura, Reggio is inspiring. And I could do a whole talk on Reggio, but I won't. But it's providing provocations through materials to have the children interact with them in order to explore and to understand and communicate ideas. Again, this is happening from the very youngest ages in Reggio Emilia, in this town. In this school, in Esperanza School, they had kindergartners through eighth graders engaging in these materials and learning this way. And here are some examples of the art centers. You can see it's nothing fancy. In some cases, it's some paint and things like that, but there's like cardboard tubes and little pieces of stuff, you know, this is glitter and some ribbon, things like that, okay? So I'm gonna show you a little bit about what they did. So this arts integration cycle that I observed them doing is they usually started with you know, some sort of provocation or a conversation talking about a concept, and then they would make a sketch, a two-dimensional sketch, and then that eventually turned into a 3D model of the concept or the idea of what they were talking about. And eventually they ended up kind of pushing it beyond just a model of something into a creation where they were synthesizing ideas and putting together kind of a concept that they were able to communicate. And throughout this whole process, children are making sense of concepts. And it's also a time for teachers to be assessing, right? Students were engaging in the sense making of scientific or social studies concepts. And I'll show you some examples. And of course, using language as that conduit as they were engaging in this work with one another. And while simultaneously teachers are engaging in formative assessment, right? And able to understand what are they understanding? What are they noticing about this work? How can I push them? How can I question them? So what does that look like? What I saw is what I call a pedagogy of participation, right? When we're talking about how does this happen pedagogically? Here's this example of starting with a 2D drawing. I think that this was a 4th grade class. They were looking at cells, right, as a science unit. by engaging in these arts, there are many, as you mentioned in the chat, multiple valid entry points and methods that kids can participate. There's a lot of iterative group work where we'll do some partner work, then we'll come together and try to build a cell together with these sticks, right? And then we'll go and do some work individually on our own, adding our own drawings. This is a kindergarten class, this far right picture. They were studying organisms and habitats, you know, the sea environment. So they were doing some study of different animals, and they were ending up drawing them onto this this canvas here and making a huge mural that would eventually be painted and quite bright. So this pedagogy of participation, it is an opportunity for language development by engaging firsthand with materials, having these experiences, working in groups in different ways where talk was necessary for the task. How do we negotiate, you know, where the cell nucleus is, or how do we understand how a fish might interact with the seaweed, and how do we negotiate this work together iteratively as a group. And again, the overall thing that is happening when you step back and look at it is sense making. Students are making sense of the concepts that they're exploring. It's both for meaning making for them as well as assessment for the teacher. Okay, there's also that language development piece through interaction with these interesting novel materials. This is an example. If you see in this bin, these are some materials from Trash for Teaching. They're like little pieces. If any of you have ever been to like a factory where they manufacture things, or if you've used a 3D printer, there's little plastic pieces that are left over. And that's what's in this bin here. Well, this third grade class was studying habitats, looking at deserts. Here you see a mentor text here. A student was deciding to draw, looking at a cactus, right? And so pulling out these materials, understanding that they needed something hard and spiky and spiny. And so being able to use language in this way by having materials, right? That's so much more dynamic than just drawing a cactus. But let's go to the atelier, to the art center, where I have all these interesting, yeah, the cactus picture is really cool, where I have all these, you know, materials of what could I find that is spiky or dry or crinkly or soft or fluffy, right? Or for whatever I want to show. Again, scaffolding that language with the students as you're helping them create the art, or as students are working on creating these pieces together. It's really not about creating the final product as it is about engaging in the process. And that's one thing that I think that sometimes we get hung up on in the arts, right? We think so much about what are they making? What is that final product we're going to hang in the wall later or in the hall? So here's some language that these students were producing. These are kids who speak Spanish as their first language at home. This is a Title I school. And so they were using language like, I need some spiked thorns. They hurt to touch. They need to protect, the cactus needs it to protect from predators. This is an adaptation, right? So that language development piece, here's another example. I think this was in the same classroom where they're working on that desert habitat, and they were looking to communicate, how can we make the desert show that? How can we show that? It's rough, it's dry, it's hard and windy. There's a landscape that we're creating. So they got some little pieces of paper and crinkled it up, and little, you know, just little bits of things that are kind of rough, dry, hard, and crinkly. And here you see this combined piece that they ended up creating, where they were putting together, here's the landscape that you saw being created. Here's, I think, the cactus, the end result of that. We added some of the animals that live there, and we have our reference books and our texts and some real objects, some cactus for them to actually feel. So, you know, it's a developmental process. It's iterative. It doesn't all happen in one day, but they're kind of creating this living and breathing artifact that is helping them engage with the concepts. Okay, here's some more language from the kids. You see a lot of academic language here, right? Or that tier 2 vocabulary that's coming out. Desert, habitat, living creature, shelter, hydrate, non-living, living, right? Really beautiful. Here's another example from a first grade class, and I want to share this with you. How are we doing on time? All right. With Corinne, can I show one more example?
Yes, please. No.
Okay.
You're good on time. You're doing great.
Okay. Of iterative group work, I want to kind of show you how that works. You know, I think we're all familiar with doing some charting, getting some kids' ideas after we're doing, you know, read aloud or engaging in some experiences, right? So here is an example of how does sound travel, right? And these are the words of the kids. Sounds, I blocked out their names. You can see them kind of blurry here, but they travel in sound waves, they travel in all directions, they allow us to hear sounds, what makes a sound, vibrations, they can travel through water, you know, all these scientific concepts that the kids are starting to come to know through their exploration of sound, through text and video and experiences, right? Here's an example of a provocation. You may have something like this in your class where you get to explore with sound. You may not want to. First graders put out these clappers and these loud noisemakers, but these are these firsthand experiences they also did. They were in downtown LA. They did a neighborhood walk and went around and drove in the, walked around the neighborhood and kind of experience sound. This picture here of this car is from that, or it's actually a bus. You can see there's multiple kids sitting in here, and they were illustrating here what it sounds like when a big bus would go by, right? Vroom, 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 vroom. And here the child was drawing the sound waves. You know, you've seen kids when they draw things, they narrate as they go along, right? So this is an opportunity for us to understand what they're thinking and learning. Here's an example of the sound waves coming out from a TV at home, or their explorations with a triangle in the classroom. Ping, ping, ping. You notice that the addition of words and language, kind of like what I asked you to do with the monsters, right? Let's label some things. Let's talk about the opportunity to teach onomatopoeia in first grade, right? Ping, ping, boom, 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 right? So this happened in small groups, whole groups, individually, in these explorations. What this moves into is this, here's another example of them creating a mural. So they took their individual drawings and then went and started to add them to a mural that they were making, a group class mural about sound. And each child in different times throughout the day, literacy stations, you know, small group work, things like that, would be adding their contributions to this group mural about sound. And then going in and painting it. There's a lot of Sharpies being used in here, and which is really not messy at all, surprisingly. But then, of course, the paint that happens. Here's the example of how it started to evolve. You see some pieces here remained and some changed, but this is a first grade classes creation about exploring sound and how sound moves. And I just invite you to look at that and think about what talk happened during the creation of this mural, or can you imagine that happened during the creation of this? This thing is probably the size of like an 8x10 rug, you know, is like there's a whole, you know, big, you can see this is a chair right here. So just so you can get an idea of like the size of the mural. So kids are all around it at different times working on it, right? Negotiating spots. Sometimes something gets painted over. How do we negotiate that? How do we think about why we might want to do that or not, right? And have that not impinge on our sense of ourselves as, well, that's my creation, right? There's this kind of collective group, collaborative whole of how do we better communicate what, you know, how sound happens. This moves into the 3D space where they kind of did a little exploration of wind chimes and then using these very interesting materials, some little bits of sparkly things and beads and whatnot, some big long tubes from Trash for Teaching, turning them into, they decided they wanted to create a class wind chime. So here we have them, you know, stringing these items onto little pieces of string or wire, figuring out how do these fit on there, how do we fasten them, how do we add it to our wind chime up here, how do we get more pieces together, how do we tape it together. This is all student created. It's not something that the teacher said, okay, you can only use these materials and here's how you tape it together and here's my example and you're going to make this. No, it was the class wanted to make a wind chime. What materials do we have in here to do that? How can we make it make the sounds we want it to make, right? And then collaboratively working on that together. You know, I'll also just mention here, yes, old keys are wonderful. Music class, yes, absolutely. One preschool class that I witnessed doing this work, they did a neighborhood walk and then they composed music based on what they heard in the neighborhood with materials that they had in their class. Really kind of cool. Yes, lots of social emotional learning, exactly. English for communication or Spanish, right? There's that negotiation, or in this case, Spanish, right? But of home language, right? Of using, I know this word in my home language, what is it in English? How do I communicate that? So bridging between two languages, right? So it's really productive space. Another piece I wanted to talk about, and I know we're running a little short on time, I overplanned here, is there's such an opportunity for engagement in assessment, right, through questioning. And so here's a little example I'll invite you to read when you receive the presentation. But this was me and the arts pedagogist, I'm KP there, talking with a student about how she wanted to show that the sand was dry and cracked, and us kind of talking with her about what does that mean when the sand is dry and cracked? Why do we think it's cracked? Why is it like that? And who might be living there? So lots of opportunities for us to understand what she knows and understands about these spaces. This one is a beautiful example. This was, I think it was a third grade, might have been second grade class, where they were studying about pollinators. And the students had made this statement of, had been investigating about why, the challenge that we're having with pollinators, right? We're losing our pollinators. So they decided to make a pollinator machine. And here we've got this example of it, and I have a video which, Corinne, remind me to get you the video. I need to dig it up, but I would love to send that to you, because she made this pollinator machine that would spin around. Like, this is the machine right here, and here's the vase with the flowers in it, and these were actual live flowers she brought in from home. She was very invested in this, and she wanted to figure out, how could we make a machine that would help us pollinate the flowers? And so she created this machine that would spin around and pollinate, and it was kind of like a prototype of this kind of work. But in talking with her about this, I uncovered that she kind of had a misconception about what pollination was and what pollination did, right? She said that as her pollinator machine would help these flowers, she said that, what I understood from her was that she had the understanding that if flowers don't get pollen, they die, which in a way is true. Like, ultimately flowers will die because they don't reproduce, but these particular flowers will not die because they're not pollinated. They just won't reproduce, right? And so it was an opportunity for me to understand, through the use of this model, how she was thinking, right? She was making that thinking visible. It's kind of like what we as teachers do when we do think alouds, right? But it's an opportunity to use materials to do a think aloud, to explain to us as teachers what they're thinking about. So that was a nice opportunity. And it turned out quite a few of the kids in the class had that idea that the flowers just would die right there, right, if they didn't get pollinated, right? But no, it led us into this idea of moving into thinking about, well, they won't be able to reproduce, so eventually, right, they will die. So really a nice opportunity for us to kind of think about this. So I'm gonna wrap up here, just looking at the time, because I want to offer time for conversation and questions, because I do know that whoever talks the most learns the most, and I really wanted you to have an opportunity to talk about this. So I want to ask you, in general, how do you feel when you do artwork? What, those of you who were making those monsters before, or how did you feel when you were watching these kids make this artwork? I would love to invite you to unmute yourself and share, or you're welcome to pop something into the chat. Right. You enjoy it. The art in your head is better. Ooh, vulnerability, communication. Yeah, I agree. I find it cathartic too, and comforting. Yeah, you have fun when you do it. Absolutely. Connecting it with mindfulness, caring for yourself. Yeah. So important right now with what our students are experiencing, you know, just having time to kind of get lost in something, or moving out of your comfort zone. Yes, Angelica, you felt a little bit of that, I think, today when you know, trying to figure out how to do this drawing. Helps you focus, become creative. It can be calming, whatever the product is. And the process can get messy. I suspect that at some point in seeing these pictures, you may have thought, oh my gosh, what a mess. How do we clean that up, right? The kids do it all, right? This is all part of the classroom community of how we, you know, how we work with our materials, how we treat them. A lot of kind of teaching that process goes into it. So, well, I asked the students this question: how do you feel when you do artwork? Because there was amazing artwork all over these classrooms and all over the hallways, as I showed you. And, oh, yay. Yes. Natalie said, I feel surprised. And I said, really? Why do you feel surprised? And she said, because we're like curious kids, right? And aren't all kids curious? They're all trying to figure out and make sense of the world, as are we, right? And so this idea of being a curious kid, I think I want to end with this idea that curious kids participate, right? If they're curious in something, if you think about like a cat, a curious cat that goes and tries to figure something out, they join a group, right? Kids participate. Curious kids collaborate. Here's some kids making, this is in California, the 4th grade project is making a mission. Problematic. I don't know if they still do this anymore, but you know, like colonialism and all of that, right? There's issues with that, but that's kind of like that that study of the state 4th grade standard that they were working on in the time. But curious kids collaborate. Here they were making a fountain for a mission, a never before seen mission. They were trying to address the drought in California. Curious kids ask questions, right? They're always asking more and more and more, and they solve problems. And here's that pollinator machine again, okay? And in talking with the teachers, I just will end with this. One teacher shared this, and I think this sums it up so nicely. The students become independent learners. They develop critical thinking skills. They're curious about their surroundings, and they use the arts to engage in this kind of independent learning and critical thinking and engagement with their surroundings. This is a picture of their neighborhood here that they made, another beautiful mural that happened as the first graders explored their neighborhood. So I'll end with that, along with a few implications here, right? It's a really robust way using the arts to engage in learning, language, and literacy moments, but this all requires something of us, right? Some of you have already said, I'm going to get some art and paint. I'm going to make a space in my classroom, right? Time in the curriculum, space, resources, and of course, teacher education, right? How do I really integrate this into my work? Here's a quote from Loris Malaguzzi, who comes out of the Reggio. He's really the founder of the Reggio Emilia tradition. And I just think that this is so beautiful to kind of sum up some of what we've been talking about here, that children need the freedom to appreciate their infinite resources that they have with them, of their hands, their eyes, their ears, and the resources of forms, materials, sounds, and colors, right? So here are some books, if you're interested in exploring that Reggio approach with loose parts is another way that it's referred to. I highly recommend these texts if you would like to kind of play around with this. You don't need to buy anything. Of course, we have our scrap exchange here in Durham, where I've gone many a time to get stuff to make things with, but even gathering things outside, beautiful stuff from nature, is a great place to start. Here are some websites that I'm providing with you for you if you want to learn more about Reggio Emilia. This Reggio Children is the Italian-based site. The NARIA website is the North American Reggio Emilia Alliance, if you're interested in getting involved with that. 2-Bit Circus has a lot of resources on there. That's formerly the Trash for Teaching. In my looking at their new website last night, they have a kind of a subgroup here called imagination.org, where they have these imagination chapters. And if any of you are interested, it looks like they're still taking like applications for you to open an imagination chapter in your area. So I highly recommend you go and look at that. And if anyone in this particular area, Durham Chapel Hill, is interested in opening up an imagination chapter, I would love to be a part of it. I think it would be a lot of fun. So if anyone is interested in that, please reach out to me, especially if you're here in this area. But if you're further away, Nashville or whatever, I encourage you to think about that as well. And I'm just going to end right here with this idea. This is a picture that I took in Reggio Emilia of a quote from the Loris Malaguzzi Center. And it was on the wall. It says, "Rights are found in ideas." And I think it's important for us to take a moment at this time. Laura, you actually just mentioned, capture, those ideas of working with students with trauma and disabilities, and disabilities, right? That we have an obligation as teachers in this moment in time to be able to make space for children to be seen as capable, as communicators, as collaborators, as people that have rights, right? And these rights are found in ideas. So online interactive art sites. Let me do some research and get back to you, Evelyn. I'm thinking off the top of my head. I know that like MoMA has some really cool interactive materials, some things that you can do. You can do simple things with your whiteboard. One of the activities that we didn't get to was we were going to do a collaborative drawing, kind of like the mural But I would let me get back to you and I'll send you some websites that I have found. I can't think of any off the top of my head besides MoMA, but I know that there's a lot out there. Even just getting out your pattern blocks, right? You elementary teachers, if you've got those, you know, the pattern blocks in your classroom and having kids making things out of those, so many creations can happen. Oh yeah, Chrome Music Lab, that's a good one. Absolutely. So I will end with that. My email address is here. You're welcome to send me an email or contact me if you want to further this conversation, or be happy to come and talk with your schools or your colleagues, share some more ideas. And when we get to in person, would love to be able to do some of this with students and teachers. So would welcome you to reach out to me at any time. So thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. I'll turn it over to Corinne. Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Uh-huh.
Okay, I was talking to myself for a bit there. Thank you so much, Kristin. That was wonderful. It was very engaging. I learned a ton of new stuff, and I feel inspired, and I think a lot of us feel as inspired as well. Please stay connected to myself and Kristin. If you have any questions about anything, here is my email. You can also find more resources on the consortium at our website, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram as well. I encourage you also to attend tomorrow's sessions. We have Working with Undocumented Youth tomorrow at 10 a.m. and our session in the afternoon is Latino and Latina and immigrant student panel discussion. So we'll have some students who immigrated from Latin America to the US who went to schools in North Carolina talking about their experiences in schools. Both sessions should be very impactful. So we would love for you to join us for those as well. If you would like a certificate of completion to earn those CEUs, please visit go.unc.edu/arts-based, yes. I will put that in the chat, if I can find the chat.